So now I'll completely switch gears and I'll talk about Canada Fleabane. Once again, this is the density on a farm in Ontario, right? I didn't take this picture, Mike Cobra did from Omafa. Anyways, that's the density, and we've seen densities like this in numerous farmers' fields where we conducted trials over the last 15 years. So this is the very first greenhouse research that we did on glyphosate-resistant Canada Fleabane. This research was done by Joe Vink. Well, he was a graduate student in my program. This is the susceptible weed biotype, and Roundup was applied at half the label rate and the commercial rate of 0.67 liters per acre, and you can see perfect control, right? And so that's what happened on Ontario farms up to 2010. They would have got perfect control of Canada Fleabane with glyphosate. And in the biotype that we collected seed from a farm in Essex County, this is the resistant biotype, the exact same rates, 333 and 666, 67 mils per acre. And you would have thought Joe forgot to put the herbicide into the tank. There is no symptomology there at all. Those plants are highly resistant to glyphosate. So the problem has become more challenging. Not only do we have glyphosate-resistant Canada Fleabane in Ontario, we also have multiple herbicide-resistant Canada Fleabane. In this research, and it wasn't good planning on my part, so don't think I was doing something really logically. We were just looking at how do you control Fleabane in corn. And this happens to be Tom Hebblethwaite's farm in Kent County. He's the lucky guy. He has glyphosate-resistant Canada Fleabane. We added Broad Strike to the tank and 100% control on his farm near Morpeth, Ontario. I think 99% of you won't know where Morpeth is. That's not important that you know where it is. Anyways, Chris Steele farms 15 kilometers from where Tom Hebblethwaite's farms. That's the important thing. He farms near Mull, Ontario, as you can see there. We put down the exact same tank mix. I was expecting it to work the exact same on the two different farms, right? They're 15 kilometers apart. Boy, this was surprising to see. And that's when I realized not only do we have glyphosate-resistant Canada Fleabane in Ontario, we also have Group 2 resistant or resistant to Broad Strike, and that's where we figured it out, and not through good planning. Anyways, here you can see the distribution of herbicide-resistant Canada Fleabane in Ontario. It extends from Essex County, adjacent to the Michigan border in the southwest, to the combined counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry, adjacent to the Quebec border. And you can see that 75% of the counties where we collected seed have multiple herbicide-resistant Canada Fleabane. It's resistant to both glyphosate as well as the Group 2 herbicides. And I did that survey of CCAs in Ontario in 2023. Anyways, Fleabane's found in 29 counties in the province. Actually, I think all of the gray counties have it as well. We just didn't get a seed lot to evaluate from those counties. I think it's right across the province. What's really shocking to me, and I had totally underestimated this, and I always think I'm somewhat connected with farmers, and I was shocked. Based on a survey of CCAs in Ontario, 60% of corn and soybean farmers in Ontario have changed their herbicide program because of multiple herbicide-resistant Canada Fleabane on their farm. And I would have never thought that it was that high. Anyways, that's what I got from CCAs. And I had data from every county across southern Ontario. So at least one CCA, in some counties was multiple. at least one CCA in all of those counties emailed me, and so that's where I got the data for that. So now I'll go on, how can multiple herbicide-resistant Canada Fleabane be controlled in a corn, soybean, as well as wheat rotation in Ontario. In terms of Fleabane interference in corn, so once again, got the exact same number over those 5 cropping seasons. Corn's worth $1,102 per acre. The average yield loss in the trials we did on commercial farms in Ontario was 54%. So that represents a loss of $595 per acre. And in our most competitive environment, there was a 99% yield loss, or a monetary loss of $1,091 if that farmer didn't implement any weed management tactics to control Fleabane in corn. So we did this very similar to what I showed you earlier with water hemp. We looked at the pre-plant herbicides in corn. Acuron Flexi provided 91% control. And you'll see that Callisto plus atrazine, Acuron and Integrity, they provided between 96 and 99% control. So really good control. This is one of the studies. Here you can see the density in the weedy control. And look at the activity of Integrity in corn. And it was an average of 99% control. And in some of those experiments, we would have had 1,000 per square meter in the weedy control. So that's the activity of Integrity. Then we looked at it, so let's say you didn't get your soil applied herbicide on, you have escapes, now the corn's up, and you have escapes. So we looked at the post herbicides, and you can see this old tank mix of a group 6 and a group 5 herbicide, partner plus atrazine, provided 93% control. Then there's a number of herbicides that are group 4, Lontrell, Enlist Duo, Armazon Pro plus dicamba. The high rate of dicamba and distinct provided 92 to 96% control. And then the group 27s, it was between 90 and 98% control. So there's some nice control options, and they're from a range of different herbicide groups. I think I'm going to stand here for the rest. So in terms of soybean, here you can see the control within corn. So multiple herbicide-resistant Canada Fleabane, it can be controlled in corn. So you have to plan for it, but we do have effective control strategies. It is way harder to control Canada Fleabane in soybean than corn. I always think it's way easier to remove a dicot weed from a monocot crop or a broadleaf weed from a grass crop than removing a broadleaf weed from a broadleaf crop, right? So we just don't have the same selectivity to remove broadleaves from a broadleaf crop. This happens to be a farm in Kent County, and it just happens to be that this farm is at the corner of a concession and side road. So I drove down the concession, I turned left and drove down the side road. I think that's a 100-acre field. That's the density of Canada Fleabane across a commercial soybean field. And I would have taken this picture well into July, right? So this guy is going to lose a whack of money due to Canada Fleabane interference. So in soybean, it had a gross value of $768. This is a different field in Kent County. Anyways, the average yield loss in soybean is 65%, and the monetary loss would be $499 per acre. And in our most severe environment, the yield loss was 99%, and there would have been a $760 per acre loss if that farmer didn't implement any tactics to control multiple herbicide-resistant Canada Fleabane on his farm. So if you're growing IP or Roundup Ready soybean, The bottom line in Canada Fleabane management is to avoid trying to use it with post-emergence herbicides, since they largely do not work, right? So if you're growing identity preserved soybean, if my memory serves me right, I am retired, so I am 67, so hopefully I get these right. You have Bassgram, Reflex, Blazer, Pinnacle Classic, First Rate Pursuit, and Clean Sweep. None of them are effective on Canada Fleabane post-emergence and IP soybean. If you don't control those Fleabane before they come out of the ground, you're behind the 8 ball the whole season. In our research, Reflex was the best post-emergence in soybean, and I'm sure all of you in this room would agree with me, that's commercially unacceptable. So you have to control it with a pre-plant burn down herbicide. So in IP and Roundup Ready soybean, I think the starting point is Roundup plus Aragon plus Merge. So Holly Biker is in the audience here. It was her master's research that identified that. And based on Holly's work, I was pretty confident that that's what Ontario farmers should do. But Aragon's the best starting point, but this is the control on Walt McLean's farm near Harrow, Ontario. This is what Holly saw in her research. Look at this. This is Mike Smith's farm near Blenheim, Ontario. The exact same herbicide, exactly what I showed you with Acuron, and really disappointing control. So here we have 90 trials where we looked at Roundup plus Aragon plus Merge. In 58% of them, the control was greater than 90%. In 9% of them, it was between 80 and 89. In 9, it was between 70 and 79. In 8%, it was between 50 and 69. And in 16% of the experiments, 5 of them, this tank mix gives 100% control. And you may not believe me, in the worst one, it gave 5, right? And so once again, the question is, why do herbicides provide such variable control? And these are applied post-emergence, so soil type has no impact on the weed control. And so why is Canada Fleabane control variable with Aragon? I think this is really important. Holly mentioned it when I was listening to her presentations this morning. And it's Canada Fleabane diameter and height at the time of application. If you forget everything I tell you this afternoon, always remember, small weeds are easier to kill than big weeds. And as weeds get bigger in size, they're just harder to control. And that's one of the reasons why you have variable control of Fleabane with Aragon. It's going to be influenced by density. I said that earlier. Every single herbicide is more effective in a low density environment than in fields with really heavy weed pressure. Failure to add the correct adjuvant, herbicide application timing during the day. If you want to get the best weed control with any post-emergence herbicide, spray every acre at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Obviously you can't do it. That's when you get the best weed control, and the reason's real simple. The reason why every post-emergence herbicide is the most efficacious at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that's when the cuticle on the leaf surface is the most fluid, right? And so it's more fluid, it's easier for the herbicide to cross the cuticle, get into the living portion of the plant. That's why herbicides work the best during the brightest sunlit hours of the day. And so just so you can think about it, all of you, I have 3 children, I have 6 grandchildren. You have a birthday party for your child, your grandchild, you have candles on the cake. The wax is solid until you light the match, right? As soon as you light the match, the wax goes from a solid to a liquid. The exact same thing happens on the leaf surface over a 24-hour period. It is the most fluid during the hottest time of the day. That's why you get the best weed control when you spray mid-afternoon. You also get the highest crop injury and it's the windiest, so you have to balance that. But in terms of weed control efficacy, We've looked at it, and we've sprayed herbicides from 6 in the morning till midnight for 13 different active ingredients. Every single one works the best at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for the reason I just gave you. It's weather conditions at the time of application, too hot and dry, or rain too soon after application. And finally, genetic variability. In terms of diameter or height at application, notice when the weeds were less than 4 inches in diameter, we had perfect control with Roundup plus Aragon plus Zencor. And notice the decrease in control as weeds get bigger. I said if you forget everything I teach you today, always remember small weeds are easier to control than big ones. And here you can see a really good demonstration of that. In terms of time of day, this is research that Chris Budd did when he was a graduate student in my program. Notice the best control was at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it decreases early in the morning and late at night. And we've done that with 13 active ingredients, as I said earlier. Every one, the curve's the same as what I'm showing you here. The only difference is how extreme the curve is. The herbicide with the greatest time of day effect is Liberty. Man, if you spray Liberty at 6 in the morning or 9 at night, you're wasting your money. Liberty has the biggest time of day effect. Roundup has a time of day effect, but it's really tiny, right? So the curve is always the same. The extent of it is active ingredient specific. In terms of genetic variability, I saw this variability in the field, and I was wondering, is that just because, their farms are 100 kilometers apart, and that's what it was in this study? Or is it something to do with the biotype? This happens to be Walt McLean's farm near Harrow, Ontario. We collected seed from his farm. Notice in the greenhouse, perfect control of the Canada Fleabane. This happens to be Mike Smith's farm near Blenheim, Ontario. Now keep in mind, these are grown in the greenhouse. They're sprayed the exact same day, right? So we spray them within minutes of each other. And this is the response to the biotype on Mike Smith's farm. And I've never said that we have group 14 resistant Canada Fleabane in Ontario. And you could say to me, well, Peter, your greenhouse research shows that there's different biotypes. The difference is so small that if you spray the weeds when they're small under good conditions, they die on both Walt McLean's farm and Mike Smith. It's only under extreme conditions that you separate these biotypes, and for that reason, we have never reported it as a resistant biotype. So we concluded that Aragon needs a tank mix partner. In this research, Aragon provided 84% control. We added 2,4-D, it wasn't much better. And in the research that Chris Budd did, he's the one that identified it, not me. The best tank mix partner to add to Canada Fleabane, or to Aragon for the control of Fleabane is Zencor. Really interesting, Mike Cobra did a survey of Ontario farmers. That is the #1 pre-plant program in identity preserved in Roundup Ready soybean in Ontario, and our data would support that. So I think in identity preserve and Roundup Ready soybean, Roundup Aragon plus Metribuzin is the tank mix of choice. Here you can see the weedy control and near perfect control with that 3-way mix. And there's lots of ways that you can buy Metribuzin. So now if you go to Extend soybean, this is some of the very first research I did on Extend soybean. Here's the weedy control. Here's the high rate of dicamba. And I was convinced that dicamba was perfect in terms of the control of Canada Fleabane. Anyways, then I found this quote on the internet, and it says, "The spirit of liberty is the spirit which is not too sure that it is right. We all need to think it possible that we may be mistaken, and we all need to be not too sure that we are right." And that sure applies to me. I was convinced that you didn't have to add anything to dicamba for the control of Canada Fleabane. And then in a subsequent year, here's the weedy control, pretty heavy pressure. This is the low label rate of dicamba, and that's the high rate, right? And so once again, exactly what I showed you with Roundup plus Aragon, Roundup plus dicamba is variable for the control of Canada Fleabane. This happens to be Jacques Cousteau's farm. This is the control. Typically, Canada Fleabane has one stem per plant. Holly showed it again this morning. And this is where we applied dicamba. We killed the growing point of the plant, and you get these buds from the axillary bud at the base of the plant. And you can see you get a short, bushy plant with 6 stems, right? And so that's what happens with dicamba on some farms. And because of that, we concluded that Roundup plus dicamba is not consistent in Xtend soybean. So here's some of the research that we did. The low rate of dicamba was 78%, mid-rate 87, high rate 91. That's not good enough when you have 4,000 per square meter. And the best addition is Aragon, and we had 97% control. Here's the weedy control, and this is a tank mix of dicamba plus Aragon. And across all of the studies that we did, the control was 97%. In terms of Enlist Duo, 2,4-D on its own isn't that good on Canada Fleabane. However, if you add Aragon to it, you can see the control was 94%. So here's Enlist Duo by itself, and this is the benefit of adding Aragon to Enlist Duo. And this experiment was done on a farm near Turin, Ontario, and that's the difference between Enlist Duo by itself and the addition of Aragon. So in Roundup Ready and in identity preserved and Roundup Ready soybean, if you do not have near perfect control of multiple herbicide-resistant Canada Fleabane, before soybean emergence, you're behind the 8 ball all season long because the post-herbicides do not work. I think Roundup plus saflufenicil, you can buy it as Aragon or Integrity, plus metribuzin, you can buy it in all sorts of different ways. Applied pre-plant provides the best and most consistent control. In Xtend soybean, dicamba plus saflufenicil provides the best control. And in E3 soybean, Enlist Duo and saflufenicil, Aragon or Integrity provides excellent control. So finally, I'll talk about the control in winter wheat in Ontario. When we started doing this research, so this would have been around 2010, I did lots of extension presentations for farmers, and I always said we had one option in terms of managing Fleabane in winter wheat, and that was Infinity. Now you have Infinity FX and Pixero, and I'll show you that they all provide comparable control. This is some research by Jessica Quinn. There's the weedy control, Pixero plus MCPA, near perfect control. Here's the weedy control in some research done by Chris Kramer, and Infinity FX right beside it, really impressive. We looked at, should farmers spray their herbicide in the fall, in the spring, or do you need 2 applications? And if you look at the data at the front of the room, you would conclude that the best time to apply a herbicide is in the spring, right? It's 98% versus 80% control in the fall. That makes sense. Canada Fleabane germinates and emerges almost every month of the year. In a study done by Susan Weaver at Harrow, it came up every single month with the exception of January because the ground was covered by snow. Anyways, so you would think it makes sense to delay it till the spring because that's when all the Fleabane are up. Anyways, what really surprised me, here we're looking at the yield of winter wheat. Even though we had 80% control in the fall, it was poorer than the spring, we had higher yield. That makes sense, right? because you remove the weeds in the fall, they weren't competing with the winter wheat crop. And so even though the overall control wasn't as good, your yield was higher, and it's all because of weed interference and how long that crop is competing with the weed. So you can see this is on a commercial farm in Kent County. Pretty nice control with Infinity. So what about other weed management practices? Aggressive tillage can be effective as it disrupts seed viability and seedling emergence through burial of the seed or seeding, and it uproots fall and spring emerge Candida fleabane present at the time of application. But just like herbicides, cultivation has been variable. This is Walt McLean's farm in Harrow, and I got this slide from Mike Cobra, and here the farmer tilled the field, and the fleabane just feathers its way through the teeth on the cultivator, and it just reroots and resumes its growth after tillage. So what about cover crops? This is some research that was completed by Tega Collette when she was a graduate student in my program. This is a farm in Kent County. I remember taking the pictures because I was shocked how good a cover crop was in terms of suppressing the growth of Candida fleabane. So what Tega did, she combined the winter wheat the previous summer. Immediately after combining wheat, she planted a cover crop, and then you can see she planted corn the following spring. This is where we had a cover crop of annual ryegrass and tillage radish. If you had told me before Tega did this research, I would have said a cover crop would never give you 100% suppression of Candida fleabane. I wouldn't have believed you, right? And that's my data. Anyways, this is only one component, right? I took this picture quite early in the spring. What really surprised me, so I took this picture early in the spring, looks really good. I took a picture in the same area a month later, and there's a whole nother flush. So it suppresses it, it helps you out. It's one component of a Candida fleabane management program, but cover crops on their own are not good enough by themselves. So anyways, I think you'll agree with me. Our research indicates and practices by Ontario farmers show that this is a manageable problem. Here, this is one road in Kent County. You'll have to believe me. Anyways, when I took the picture, I was facing east, right? There's a soybean field on both sides of the road. Candida fleabane is windblown seed, just like dandelion. It doesn't stop at the yellow line on the road. I turn to my right, so now I'm looking south. I don't know, you might use the word train wreck to describe that soybean field. That's pretty disappointing control. And you turn your body 180 degrees, and his neighbor has perfect control. My point is, Ontario farmers have figured out how to manage this problem. Here it's another location, another year in Kent County. Here I'm looking south. I know this perfectly. I remember taking it, standing on the yellow line road. Don't do that. Could be bad for your health. Anyways, once again, it's a soybean field on both sides. I turn my body 90 degrees. I'm now facing east. Look at that. Just awful control. And I turn my body 180 degrees, and it's perfect control. Once again, obviously, this farmer's figured out how to manage this problem. I took this picture in a field in Kent County. I think you'd agree, super disappointing fleabane control. 2 years later, the same crop, and this farmer's figured out the answer. Isn't that amazing, right? So obviously farmers have figured out how to manage it. So our research indicates and practices by Ontario farmers show that this is a manageable problem, but Ontario farmers will lose a tremendous amount of money due to yield loss, due to glyphosate weed interference, and they'll lose money because they have to spend more money on weed management. So can farmers eliminate this problem through good management? And here, I obviously stopped and took this picture. I think all of you guys think all Peter Sikkema does is drive and stop his car and take pictures. But anyways, isn't this amazing, right? I'm on a gravel side road. It is in Kent County. The reason why I stopped, the shoulder of the road is a monoculture of Canada Fleabane. You can be almost 100% sure that's multiple herbicide-resistant Canada Fleabane. It has windblown seed, and it's going to re-infest all the fields in the neighboring area, right? So I think Ontario farmers are going to deal with multiple herbicide-resistant Canada Fleabane indefinitely into the future. So, and I'd like to thank the funding agencies. There's lots of farmers in the room. So thank you for your checkoff dollars through Grain Farmers of Ontario. They have been extremely generous supporters of my research program over my whole career. And so thank you for that. I do want to thank the representatives of the agricultural products companies. They've been generous supporters of our research program as well as federal and provincial funding programs. I want to thank the research technicians that worked with me during my career, the graduate students that I had the opportunity to learn from, as well as summer research assistants. If it wasn't for their hard work, I wouldn't have this information to share with you today. So thank you very much. If you have any questions at all in terms of weed management in corn, soybean, and wheat, I'd be more than happy to try to address them.